Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's Fly Tying Friday. Today, the 7th of March, Gary Begley is going to wow us with some wet flies, and we're going to talk about half or whip. We'll tell you about that and what that means here in a little bit. We're the Boise's from we're the Beaties from Boise, Idaho. I'll get that right here in a minute. It's tough being old, Gretch. That's just the way it is. Anyway, folks, we're the Beaties from Boise, Idaho. And a word to everyone: this is the last time in several months where we're going to send out a request or an invitation with 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, because next week it'll say Mountain Daylight Time, and so most all of you will be going on daylight time as well, except for a few places that doesn't do that, like Arizona. But tonight we are very pleased to welcome our good friend, um, Gary Begley. And Gary, let me tell the folks about you. Now, Gary is the fly tying director for the Ohio Council of the Fly Fishers International. He has helped with the Buckeye United Fly Fishers tying classes for several years. He has run a monthly tying demo for 15 years, and the last several have been online. He recently started the Ohio Fly Tying Guild. It's an online monthly tying demo. Gary demonstrated tying at the 2025 Greater Cincinnati Fly Fishing Show and was a celebrity tyer at the Northern Ohio Fly Fishing Expo. Gary, it's all yours. We're looking forward to what you have to share with us.
Okay. Well, thank you, Al, and Gretchen, both for inviting me back again. What I have planned is two nymphs, two real very effective fly nymphs or fly tying nymphs, and I'll get it right. Both of them designed to fish in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park area in the streams around. That'll be the first one. It's a George nymph. It's George Nymph. That's the man's last name is Eddie George, came up with it. And depending on which account you read, it was either designed in the mid 50s, 1950s, or early 1930s. Just depends on where you want to go with it. Either way, it's several decades old, obviously, and it's a very, very good pattern. It's a George Nymph. That's what it. George Nymph. That's what the little guy looks like. And there's two things that he intended to make it look a little more realistic. The tail is angled downward. That's intentional. And the other thing would be the white spot on top, which he's hoping will imitate the gas bubbles that the nymph's going to use to get up to the surface. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out. Fresh hook. I'll show you how I like to tie them. On the recipe, I just put basically a standard wet fly or nymph hook. I'm actually going to use a 2X long tonight. I think it'll be easier to see the various components. Thread back here. Mark a bare spot up here. I don't want to let anything from the rear section get up in that until I'm ready to start tying that front section. I'll loosely refer to it as a thorax. All right, the tail is.
Do you ever tie this with a bead?
I'm sorry?
Do you ever tie these with bead heads on them?
I haven't tied this particular fly with a bead head. The next one I have. And of course it's going to work just fine. The tail is fairly long for a nymph. Got almost hook shank length. Get that rolled up. That's a little bit long. Go down around the bend just slightly to get that tail pointing down. Get rid of that extra. It's going to have a wire rib. Get that tied in. And the wing case is going to be some turkey tail fiber. Got a small strip, which should be about the right size. Actually, I'm starting that upside down from where I want it. We'll fix that. Like a wing case. And that explains the copper wire, because that would certainly be very vulnerable to fish's teeth and rocks and things of that nature. Now, from this point, take a couple peacock herl, 2 specifically. I'm going to tie them in by the butts, but I'm going to cut the very end off. It's too stiff and no flue on them. All right, now, do something a little different. I'm going to form a dubbing loop. I'm not going to use it as a dubbing loop. This bottom leg was my, I'm sure you guys can see that. The bottom leg was my working thread. So it's wound in to the body real well. I'm going to cut this. Now I've just got an extra piece of thread that I want to put with the peacock in order to strengthen it a little bit. I'll twist this clockwise. And since we are going to have the rubber or the copper rib going to be double protected, just going to run this forward. Get rid of my excess peacock and thread. Now we're going to need to tie down the wing case.
Hey, Gary,
Yes.
I didn't notice which way did you wrap that peacock curl around the thread, clockwise or counterclockwise?
Twisted clockwise.
Thank you.
Once you mention that, I really don't think it's going to make that much difference. Frankly, as long as you get it twisted together well, just add some durability. Okay. Get a rib wrapped. Again, the way this fly's coming together, I don't think it would make any difference if this was counter wrapped or not. I kind of like the way it looks counter wrapped. So that's what I'm going to do. Instead of trying to helicopter it off, I've got a pair of what I call utility scissors that are very sharp and staying very sharp, surprisingly, because I cut all kind of wire and tinsel and all sort of things with those. But I don't use my good scissors for that. Excuse me. Now, could use some goose feather, some barbs off of goose. I'm going to use poly yarn, and this is a little bit less than half the regular thickness of a piece of yarn. Spin my thread to get it to cooperate. A little bit of bulk underneath there. Now, you can use a hackle to get, it's going to add a little movement and perhaps look like legs. But I like to just put an oversized beard, I'll call it. I will say one thing before I cut off the turkey. I wanted to leave it all the way up here to build up a little bit of under bulk. So I forgot that. Okay.
I love that fly, but I have to tell you, Gary, for years and years and years, I've tried to get my tails to all go straight up behind the hook, and this one has the tail going down. Do you know any reason for that, or I'm just
It
curious?
was just from the accounts I read about it, that was just his method of trying to make it look a little more realistic.
I can tell you it would cause some wiggle in during the strip part of the retrieve, would seem to me like.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the difference is how a tail looks on a nymph as compared to how it looks on a dry.
That could very well be too.
I think on a nymph, it often goes down, and on a dry, it goes straight around. Maybe.
That was easy. This one's a Tellico. The account that I can find on the internet, they all said that it was designed in 1927 by a priest to fish the Tellico River in eastern Tennessee, and I think it runs through to a little bit of North Carolina as well. It's an excellent fly. I'll vouch for that. Now, it's become quite popular. I've seen tires out west tie it on YouTube. I've seen tires in Europe, Scandinavia tie it as well. So apparently, it's reached more boundaries than just the Great Smoky Mountains.
I can tell you, Gary, that it's one heck of a good fly on the Yellowstone River in Montana. I can't talk about any of those other places, but it sure is there.
Okay. I got the fly, I got the fly in the vise. I'll go ahead and show you guys what it looks like. It may be a little bit different than you've seen or tied before. But the golden pheasant tippet tail, I like the way that looks, but I've also seen it tied with guinea in the same fashion. All right. I'll go ahead and get started on a Tellico. Now this one I have seen tied with a bead, and I have tied them as well. Actually, I'm not using any weight for these demos this evening, but I would suggest, since the streams in that part of the country are very fast running mountain streams, I would suggest some rafts with either lead or non-lead, and this one especially, bead head with several rafts of lead or non-lead behind it. Get the thread started, need to get a thread base back and tie in the tail. And like I mentioned, the golden pheasant tippet. I cut just a little piece off of it. Form a tail. That section, I'm going to fold it. So it should look pretty decent all the way around. This one has a little bit longer tail than one might expect as well. It started fraying there a little bit. I think it's going to be okay though. And the same deal with wing case for this one. I have one. It might not be. I have one ready. It might not be long enough. Let me show you how I sized the tail to begin with. I've got a hook in my forceps here. Same size hook as what I have in the vise, and I like the wing case to be approximately the length of the same length as the hook gape is. So I can just lay that up against there and get a closer measurement than I would get by trying to eyeball it. There's my slip of turkey. There we go. That one looks better than what I had planned. It's on so the good side will be on top whenever I pull it over. We need a wire rib for this one as well. I found it easier to keep things on top of the hook shank instead of on the bottom. So all you gotta do is invert the hook. It makes it much simpler. At least that's the way it works for me. Now I'm going to use basically the same technique as I did with the peacock. I'm just going to use one peacock coil and twist it with a piece of thread for the rib. Loop again. I keep track of this with the bottom loop was my working thread, so I know it's tacked into the body well. Put those away till later. And now for the body material, you can use chenille, you can use yarn, you can use floss. I'm going to use a small piece of fine size chenille tonight. I was thinking about that. You could probably adjust how the fly rides in the water a little bit using poly yarn. Would make it float a little bit higher, I would think, than this chenille would. Chenille, I believe, is going to soak up water where the poly won't. Extra. That's not my thread, that's my wire. There's my thread. And again, I'm going to twist this clockwise. Just add a little durability. And I'm sure it's not going to matter if this is wrapped counterclockwise or I'm sorry, counter wrapped or not. I like the way it looks this way. Out there ready. Make sure the wing case is going to look decent. I'm going to go ahead and put the wing case down. More wraps on there for some security. I'm not going to counter wrap this white rib the opposite direction of the peacock rib. Utility scissors. Find my material. Here it is. Like I say, I like to keep these long for some extra movement in the water. I'd like to have it angled back a little bit more, but as soon as it gets in the water, that's what's going to happen to it anyway. There's my version of Tennessee Tellico.
Looks very much like the one we used to fish on the Yellowstone.
Yep.
Some minor differences, but killer fly.
Yeah.
For something so simple.
Yep, it sure is. And
Any
like I said, I
questions
usually
out there for Gary?
So that tail was about the length of the shank, correct?
very close to. Yep.
I haven't
That's
tied one of
interesting.
those in years, but seems to me like we always tied them with a bright yellow floss rather than the chenille.
Okay.
But what a pain in the rear! I like the chenille.
Yeah. Yeah. The first couple that I tied, I haven't tied any in several years, but I used just the single strand floss. And I'm thinking, I got to find a way to do this quicker because this is going to take a lot of time.
And you got to really build the body up in order to put your floss on it.
Yep.
Drove you nuts.
And Barry typed in the comments that he thought that was a good looking fly.
Oh, well, thanks, Greg.
Hey, Gary, you on the beard, I think that's what you called it on the other one. I don't see that on your your materials list. I presume that that's brown hen hackle.
Yes, brown hen would work fine.
What what?
What I actually used was a schlappen,
Oh, schlappen. Okay, great.
fairly small size. Just anything, any sort of fibers that's going to give you some movement in the water, as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, I did notice that. Sorry about that. I did not put that on the recipes. I should have.
Well, we want to thank you, Gary. I also wanted to point out something. Gary didn't narrate to some of it, but he had about 10 really great tips just kind of snuck in on the two flies that he shared with you. And some of those tips somehow ended up in Fly Tire Magazine on page 49. It was called The Twist. Now, I'm going to have to tell you that when Gretchen and I sent that article to Fly Tire, we called it The Begley Twist. But somehow or another, they, in the editing process, they said doing the twist is better than the Begley twist. So, I mean, they're the editors. They do whatever they want to do. But we wanted to point out to you that if you've got Fly Tire Magazine, the most recent issue, look on page 49, and you'll see a really incredible tip, another one from Gary. And on the weekly tip, we're going to talk about the half, the whip, or both. And what do we mean by that? Well, what we mean is that it is possible to do a half hitch with a half hitch tool. It's also possible to do a whip finish with a half hitch tool, and we're going to show you that in detail. Now let's start over here at the vise.
So can you do a half hitch with a whip finish tool?
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Absolutely. It's called the one-turn whip finish.
Just dawned on me.
Anyway, anyway, let me get this out of the way here. And what I want to do is just stick a hook in the vise. And I'm just going to take some, this is 3/0 gray thread. And I think it'll show up good enough. If it doesn't, I'll grab some black and we'll use it. But I tested it this afternoon and it seemed to work pretty good. Let me just put just a little bit of thread wrap on the hook, and we're going to pretend that this is a fly. And I've got the fly up to this point, and I'm going to finish it off. Well, one of the things about we like to do with almost every fly that we finish is we like to throw a half hitch in before we do the whip finish. With this particular style of completing the fly with a half hitch tool doing a whip finish, it's absolutely mandatory. But let's start with what each one of them is. And let me get my close-up glasses on so I can see what I'm doing.
So let me just repeat what you said because it kind of went by me and I want to make sure I caught it. What you're saying is this is almost essential to do a half hitch when you're using a half hitch tool to do the whip finish.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we like to do that also when we're using a whip finish tool. And why is that? So the thread doesn't slip around and end up going where you don't want it. And it's really important when you use a half hitch tool to do a whip finish. So let's just take a look momentarily, if you will, at what a half hitch looks like as it goes on the hook. Because I want to make sure, Gretchen, you're going to have to tell me, does this show up good so that people can see it?
Looking good.
There's your half hitch going in place, anchored in place. Now, the difference between a half hitch and a whip finish using the same tool is based on a number of things. Let me do another half hitch just to show you what I'm doing. And I want you to pay attention not so much to the thread going on onto the hook, but watch what I'm doing with the tag end. I'm pulling straight towards me, towards the camera, you, and that pulls it in tight. Now, if I do the whip finish, which is 2 turns, and I pull straight towards me, again, pulling straight towards the camera, towards you, towards me, it becomes a 2-turn jam knot. It is not a whip finish. Do that one more time so you can see it.
Just,
You're going to zoom in closer?
yeah.
Okay, let's zoom in closer. And we're just going to slide this in place. And remember now, I am pulling straight towards me, the way you normally do when you do a half hitch. Slides in there, and I want you to notice that it becomes a 2-turn jam knot. buried in that whip finish or in that half hitch. So how do you take this and change it into a whip finish, doing the same thing? Well, it's the angle of the pull. And I want you to notice that I am pulling back at almost 60, 70 degrees to the shank. And this is about 45 degrees to the shank. Let me see. I'm going to do it kind of downward so you can see better. This is more along the shank. This is about 45, and then this is straight at the camera. That way you'll be able to see. I'm going to have to do it a little bit different for me, but I want you to see what's going on here. First, I need to, instead of pulling tight like this, which keeps it tight all the way through, I need to pull softly towards the back of the hook. And I want you to notice that it slides all the way to the back of everything. That's an over exaggeration of what's going on, but it's when you loosen up and go back like I just did, it ends up, get back up front here, back like I just did, it ends up sliding back, and you can reposition those turns rather than becoming a jam knot. The definition of a whip finish. Now we're going to talk about that now before I go any further. I'm going to bring this up like this, and this is a whip finish tool. And I think you can probably see you want to back off on that close-up, Gretch. And got the whip finish tool in my hands, and you can see that I've got the triangle shaped and everything. And I'm going to give you a definition that does not exist until today. And the definition is this strand right here is the cinch tag. That comes from Dutch Bachman and Fred Dupre. This strand right here, the one that goes around and around the hook, also comes from Dutch and Fred, and it's called the vertical wrap. Now, why did I have to come up with a definition? Well, let me finish this whip finish before I do anything, and I will come back and talk about it for a second. I'm just going to wrap that into place there. Okay, and we'll set that down. And let me shorten up my tag in here. Now, why did I have to come up with a definition? Well, let me get the right name here. I downloaded a Navy book on knots. It's called, where the heck? Here we go. The Seamanship Knot Manual. And it's a PDF. You can get it off of the internet if you just do a search, the Seamanship Knot Manual. Not that you want it. You're going to have, it took me 2 hours of searching through that thing to find something that even looked like a whip finish. They called it a common whip. And yeah, it would do the job really well. It was more like the whip that you do on a rod wrap, the thread on a rod wrap than on a fly. But that's as close as I could come. And all the way through this Seamanship Knot Manual, I did not find one single term identifying different parts of the strand. It just it says, notice that the arrow is pointing, see figure 3 in the arrow, and it showed an arrow pointing, and it was a line drawing. Well, so some artist drew it, and then it'd say, see the other arrow in figure number 2. So he never did name them. So I turned to my buddies in the fly tying group and said, guys, I could sure use some help in identifying what to call this stuff. So from now on, the one that you pull and tighten the others, you've got 2 parts to it. You've got the cinch tag, and you've got the vertical whip. So thanks, Fred. Thanks, Dutch. But anyway, let's get back over here now to the vise. And I want to give you the trick to making a whip finish turn out perfect. And here it is. I'm gonna wrap this thread around there, and now I'm pulling towards the back. Now it's starting to come off of the half-hitch tool. If I pull, it's going to end up back on the back of the hook. So I then bring the thread, after it's slipped off, I bring the thread to the point, and what I'm actually doing is I'm starting the pull back here, and then I bring it forward, and it'll allow it to slide into place. Now, when do we use this? I'm telling you right now, this particular half hitch whip finish is only needed on a couple, three flies, and the one we use it on almost exclusively is tying off a parachute without having to disturb the hackle. Now, do we care about disturbing the hackle? Probably not. Our hackles will go back. But why do it when all you have to do is just do a quick couple of loops, slip it into place? You've never touched the hackle. You haven't had to do anything to it. You drop some glue in there and you're good to go. But anyway, so let's get back here one more time.
I also use it when I've crowded the eye a bit.
I was just getting to that.
Oh, okay.
One of the things in the process of tying a fly, we're going to give you a free tip, is, boy, I'll tell you what, you've got stuff right out into this eye. You can push it back with your half-hitch tool. And if you really want to push it back and anchor it back, you're going to do what our buddy in the Netherlands showed us here a couple years ago. I'm going to get right up front here. There we go. We've just jammed right up to the hook eye, and now we have to tie this thing off. What we do is you can push all your materials back, but you can do a half hitch and push materials at the same time, push back, and then slide that half hitch in there and tighten it up tight against those materials. Do a second one, tight up against those materials. Finish with a whip finish. This is the Allen Gretchen whip finish. Now, it's pulling back, now pull towards you, and it allows those to slip over the top of each other, and it puts a whip finish into a very small part of the hook. Any questions? Okay, well, that's good, I guess. I guess that's good.
Al, I got
Um,
one question with respect to the amount of tension or the amount of tension you put on the thread when you're doing your whip or your half hitch. Does that make it, how does that come off of there? Does it come off real easy or hard or I have a problem with my tension when I'm doing that knot.
So are you saying you have trouble with the wraps around the half hitch tool sliding off the half hitch tool?
Yeah, and am I doing too tight or is it?
Well, that's a two-part process. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you another trick. This is the bonus trick of the thread that doesn't want to slide off of your half-hitch tool. I'm going to do it, Gretchen. But we did it in the magazine.
Play with your nose on the oil
Okay,
your nose.
You do it just like this.
Yep.
Get it all greased up good,
Yep.
and now it'll slide just fine.
I
Now-
use that is on ferrules on putting a rod together.
Excellent. Anyway, and that's how you can slide it off. The one thing you need to do is what I've always said in the past when we use the half-hitch tool for the whip finish is that I would just say allow it to relax just a little bit so that the turns could slip over the original strand. The original strand now we know we've identified as a cinch tag.
In other words, you don't really want to wrap that around the half hitch tool tightly.
No.
It's a pretty gentle wraps that
Yeah.
you do around the half hitch tool.
Okay.
And then plus a slick half hitch tool.
Right.
And those two things should cause it to slip off.
Yeah, for the biggest part. And if it doesn't, that you saw the solution, and I'm not going to repeat it. I mean, my ugly nose is enough once. Stop the laughing. We don't need that. We don't need that. Anyway,
Thank you.
if
What
there's no
I
other-
learned just by accident was if I just spin my half hitch tool as I bring the thread forward, if it wants to stick, it just spins right off and right on.
Excellent. Hey, like that. And I have not run into that. I discovered my nose and never had to go any further, but that's, yeah. And I got to tell you, before I discovered my nose, and the story is, it was back in the early 80s. I had met a fellow from Barn End, Wyoming by the name of Marvin Nolte, one of the best fly tyers I've ever met anywhere. And he introduced me to the nose trick because up until then, I would stay at a motel And when I get ready to leave the motel, you know, those little bitty bars of soap that they give you that are hard you can take a shower with, it's not big enough for anything. Well, that was great to put in your fly tying kit to grease up your bodkin. And that's what I did for years until I learned that my nose, and I didn't have to worry about finding a small piece of soap. My nose worked just fine, and I always had it with me.
There's
I'd
another thing.
comment that the other thing that I do sometimes is different half-hitch tools. So there are smaller and larger half-hitch tools to fit smaller and
Absolutely.
larger hook eyes. So sometimes the difficulty of getting the thread off the half-hitch tool is because
Absolutely.
the tool is too big. Use a smaller tool and it'll come off easier.
I think we still have some of them. We
Yeah.
have, it's 3.
We sell a kit that's got a total of 6 sizes. Yep.
It's 3 tools with a different size on each end
Yeah.
for a total of 6.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I got mine right here.
Oh,
I think another important thing is to try to get your thread as flat as possible. As you're wrapping down the hook shank, you're imparting twist, as we all have heard a few times about, you know, in thread control. But if your thread is twisted up too much and you try to control it on that half hitch tool, a lot of times it doesn't want to play right. But if you can flatten your thread as much as possible, it makes a smoother knot, and it doesn't try to roll one way or the other coming off of that tool.
Plus, I like a flatter thread on my head anyway. It makes a smoother
it sure
head on
does.
your fly.
Yep. Even if you're doing a standard whip,
Yeah.
or the whip with the half hitch tool, if you kind of flatten it a bit, it collapses off of that much better going around the original cinch tag.
Al, another one, since a lot of these tools have a pitch to them
Oh yes,
towards the hook eye, is using your index finger to secure the thread so it doesn't slip off the front of that tool.
yep. All excellent tips, and all very very relevant. Before I leave the weekly tip, I wanted to just give you a sneak
I want to say, so what you're saying is, as you're wrapping, before you get it onto the eye, your index finger helps hold it on the half hitch tool. Is that what you said?
Right. Just
Okay.
lay your finger on top of that
Yeah.
loop on
Okay.
the tool. Keep it from
Okay.
falling off
Good.
the front.
Let's make sure we know what you're talking about. You mean you do this, and then so it doesn't slip off, you're holding it there with your finger like.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, got it. Good idea. Very
Yeah.
good idea.
Okay.
It's that time of the evening when we learn from all of you, or we share with all of you, something that's not totally related to tonight's subject. And what I wanted to talk to you about tonight, I got a stunning bit of email from a friend, David Buckner, and he shared with me something that just blew me away. And I'm going to have to be honest with you. I've ticked off more than a few salmon fly tires when I basically look at flies as a craft project. There's some people that's better at their craft than others, but I've never looked at them as artwork. And tonight I'm going to have to take a second look at that and probably rethink what I think about that. And let me share with you, and I'm going to let David pick it up at this point, but make sure you talk about the website, David. But here you go. David,
Well,
you pick it up.
So I'm a huge Kansas Jayhawk fan, and there's a fellow named Val Kropanicki in Connecticut. He's a high school art teacher, but he does a lot of steel work too, and he does a lot of different artistic hooks. And I commissioned him to tie me a Jayhawk, Kansas Jayhawk fly. And he typically ties his flies with a lot of symbolism in them. So we talked through championships and coaches and things like that. He's got those 6 white feathers. Those symbolize 6 national championships. There's 6 of those small flies coming off the main hook, and those symbolize the 6 coaches there. Fog Allen's got 2 of them. Larry Brown. No, Fog Allen's got 3. Larry Brown's got 1, and Bill Self's got 2. And those are actually colors of their birthstones. But he really reaches back and throws in a lot of symbolism. You can see his web address up top, vkstillworks.com. I really encourage you to go out there. He loads probably 20 flies a year, but they're dated by year of all the flies that he's tied. And each one of them has an incredible story behind it. He spent a lot of time with me on the phone describing it. But you can see there, I don't know if you're familiar with the Kansas Jayhawk mascot, but that is the beak of the Jayhawk. And he made that himself, along with the rest of the hooks. And as you go out to the website, there's probably, I don't know, 15 years and 20 flies a year. So just some incredible works out there on his website.
You're looking at several hundred. I went there with the idea of looking for 2 minutes, and I got to tell you, I was there for over an hour and I hardly touched it.
And like I said, each one has a long story behind it. But there you got school colors, championships, coaches, all embedded in that fly, as well as the beak. I really like the hook. It's really special. And he mounts those and can tie a fly to your specifications with some artistic flair to it and get it mounted and get it to you. He has a drawer at the American Museum of Fly Fishing now, and he does a lot with them to honor a lot of their folks that they're recognizing, heritage awards, things like that. And I've got a couple on my wall. One is a cottonwood red is what it's called, and it's actually had the dubbing is cottonwood seed from the river that he fishes. And I've got another one that's a seasons of the year, and there's a winter, spring, summer, fall, 4 flies in the plate. But he just encouraged you to look at his website. Really amazing work. That's it, Al.
Whatever you do, when you go there, don't go there thinking you're only going to spend a couple minutes. If, at the very least, you'll spend a couple minutes saving that website so you can go back and really spend some time later. It's stunning, and it was almost, I wouldn't say it was life-changing for me, but it sure yanked me up short and made me rethink my thoughts about artwork and flies. But anyway, is there anyone else out there now that wants to do a share?
At the Atlanta show, I made a material discovery y'all might be interested in. Moonlit Fly Fishing is now offering Nutria zonkers, and they come in a 3 and a 5 millimeter. This is a white, but you can see. Let me grab the 5 millimeter, so you'll be able to see a little bit better. Here's one in tan. But what you got there is with those zonkers, and they're very clean cut. You can see how straight they're cut. But what you've got there is like a rabbit underfur with a squirrel tail guard hair. And Moonlit, and the only place I've been able to find Nutria zonkers before is Skeena Fly Fishing. But Moonlit's got 6 colors, and 3 millimeter, 5 millimeter, and you can actually buy the white and dye it. I'm dyeing some purple myself, but it's just an amazing material.
I must admit, I've never seen Nutria zonker strips before. There we go. That Tellico, Gary, I tell everybody this, it looks better than the one you tied. I'm sorry.
I agree. It does.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for tonight, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. For now, it's a wrap. Until next time, see ya.